Okay, now that you have endured all my philosophies on Archviz workflows, let's get into some experimentation. I'm going to take a simple Vray rendering, take it into 3 different software packages. Okay, so we're going to try it out with Vantage, taking it from Vray to Vantage. We're going to take it from Vray to Twinmotion, and we're going to take it from Vray to UE5. Alright, I'm on my continued hunt for the perfect workflow. So in this video, I'm going to talk all about the Archviz tools that I'm already using based on 20 years of experience in the industry working as a professional. But there's some things that are not totally worked out yet, and that's some of the new technology, especially with real-time rendering. So those I'm going to put to the test and see which one's worthy to be added to my perfect workflow. First, I'm going to talk about what every good Archviz workflow needs, and then I'm going to talk about where I have room for improvement or room for experimentation. And then at the end, after we check out the results of that experimentation, I want to hear from you guys, feedback about what your workflow works like and what you think is the best option for some of these real-time tools. I'm sure you've got opinions on it, and I'm going to share with you some of mine. So if you've been watching my videos lately at all, you've seen that I did a comparison of Vray versus UE5 to see how some of the offline renderers compare with real-time rendering. Make sure to check out those videos on my YouTube channel if you have not already done so. And I got a question on my YouTube comments that said, why is anyone using anything other than real-time rendering at this point? And it made me think a little bit, like, is real-time good enough so that we don't need to use offline renderers anymore like Vray or Corona? Let me know what you guys think in the comments, but my answer is a definite no at this point still. But to me, it seems clear that there's still a demand for super high-end static renderings that can only be achieved with a nice offline render engine. If you browse Instagram and find all the very best renderings, they'll have mostly been done with a powerful modeling tool like 3ds Max or similar. But it's that combo of powerful modeling tool with a high-end render engine like Corona or Vray that produce most of the most stunning imagery that we see for architectural renderings on the internet. Some of you probably disagree on what renderings look the best. Feel free to tear me apart in the comments if you think I'm an idiot. However, this is not the solution for every project, right? The high-end solution is not the right solution for every project. There's a lot of different things to consider when we're talking about architectural visualization and what's needed. So when considering the perfect workflow, there's a couple things that I'm looking for. I need it to be iterative. I need it to be fast, cheap, adaptable, powerful. I don't want to find the limitations of my workflow when I'm in the middle of a project with big demands, right? So it needs to be powerful. It needs to be expandable. It needs to be able to accomplish all the various different requests that I get depending on who the client is or what the project is or what the budget is or what the timeline is, etc. So there's no single program that can do all these things. So the answer is that we have to learn multiple different programs in order to meet every request that is thrown at us as Archviz artists. So one thing to keep in mind is that everyone needs a really, really good modeling tool. Okay, and it needs to be powerful enough that it can accomplish everything you need. And I know a lot of people use basic modeling software and then they just buy a lot of models. But I'm talking about needing to do custom stuff, which if you're a professional in the Archviz field, you're going to have to do custom stuff like furniture and other objects and things like that. So if it's not available to buy, then you're out of luck unless you know how to model it yourself and have a program that can actually handle it. So I need to do a full exploration of the different modeling solutions out there, but that's for a different video. So you guys know I use 3D Studio Max. It covers all my needs. There's no limitation as far as what you can model in there. And I do use other plugins and other third-party things in conjunction with 3ds Max, but it's my base. I see a lot more people using Blender now, which is great, I think. Free program, right? Price is a lot better than 3ds Max, and as far as I can tell, Blender is capable of doing all the same things 3ds Max is. So totally solid option as well. A lot of people use SketchUp, very widespread, very popular. I think SketchUp will struggle on some of the higher end things. Maybe with plugins and things like that, you can accomplish a lot of the same things. I don't know about modeling organic, high poly furniture and other objects for your scenes like that with SketchUp. But otherwise, totally solid option. I've seen some great images created with SketchUp models. Then I think you need an advanced offline rendering solution. Vray is what I've used for years. I love it. Vray is a fantastic user-friendly tool. It's more advanced than some other render engines possibly. But again, there's no limitations to what you can do with Vray. Vray, solid program. It's more advanced, harder to learn possibly, but extremely powerful. So I've said this before, but software typically is a trade-off. It's either easy to learn, easy to use, but not very powerful, or it's hard to learn and hard to use, but very powerful, right? They all fall on that spectrum somewhere. If we want to be able to accomplish every request, we need to start pushing towards the high end, meaning it's harder to use, harder to learn, but extremely powerful. That's where 3ds Max plus Vray is a great solution. Okay, so I think we need some sort of advanced rendering tool. Okay, but that doesn't answer every question or every problem that we might come across. There's also a need for quick and easy real-time rendering. The ability to do iterations, quick iterations with a quick turnaround for different design ideas when you're working with designers and architects, and also the ability for very fast feedback on designs. Both these things are super important, and this is where real-time solutions can come in. But the question is, what is the correct real-time solution in this case? So I can think of a couple good options. There's Lumion, which I already have classes for. There's Twinmotion, I already have class for that. There's Vantage, which is a newer option that Chaos Group has come out with. There's Enscape, which I have not done much exploration in, but I have seen it used widely throughout the architectural industry. These are all solutions that are kind of, I don't know if you call them entry-level real-time, because that sounds kind of mean, but they are super easy to learn. The whole point of them is that they're easy to learn, easy to use. Anyone can do it. They can take their model and start doing real-time rendering with it fast and easy. And they oftentimes have large libraries of things that you can add into your model to add flourish to it. Lumion especially and Twinmotion are kind of full solutions where you take a model in there and you can add materials, you can add models, you can walk around them and do kind of VR and real-time rendering. Vantage is a little different. We'll take a look at it and see what kind of things it can do for us, but it's more like taking what we're familiar with Vray and rendering it all for us in real time, and you can actually walk around it a little bit. It is not exactly the same kind of tool as Lumion or Twinmotion, but we will explore. And then there's a need sometimes for high-end real-time or high-end VR, which I have classes on this using Unreal Engine. I think this is the main solution for this kind of thing right now, where you may need, well, if you've taken my class in UE4, you've seen we export an entire model, an entire scene into UE4, and we can walk around our rendering, our fully light-baked and rendered model. One side note about the model you're looking at here. This is completely downloadable for free on my webpage as one of my resources. You can get this model. Okay, and it comes with all the furniture and everything. It's pretty sweet because it's totally free. Anyway, if you're interested in that, check the description below. You can grab this model and a bunch of other free models and resources, just saying. And we can actually interact with it. We can put it in a headset and actually feel like we're inside that building, and we can actually go and like touch things, grab things, change materials on things. Like this is really high-end stuff, and in my opinion is the most powerful way to communicate your design ideas. Not often needed because it takes more time and effort, so there needs to be a budget for it. There needs to be a patience for it, a willingness to wait instead of getting instant feedback, because that's not what UE4 is typically about for me. It's about high-end stuff when I know what the design is going to be and I just need to present it and communicate it in a really, really flashy way. Okay, so not the best for iteration maybe, but definitely good for the high-end level visual communication. Okay, and so maybe you guys have different ideas. Let me know in the comments. But for me, UE5 is the solution. UE4, UE5, Unreal Engine is the solution for that kind of thing. Maybe there's some other things out there that I haven't thought about or explored yet. Okay, now that you have endured all my philosophies on Archviz workflows, let's get into some experimentation. So the first thing that I did was take it into Twinmotion, and they've made this super easy with the Datasmith plugin. You can download Datasmith, and then in Max you can just save your file as a Datasmith file, and it will come right into Twinmotion. And it will translate all your stuff for you and bring it right in as a complete file. The only problem in this case, and maybe you guys know how to fix this, but when I brought in Cosmos objects from Vray, because they have kind of proprietary textures on them and stuff, that I'm sure Vray doesn't want to just give away or share in other programs. But when you bring it into Twinmotion, everything came in without the materials on here. So I had to actually go into the Twinmotion library and start dropping new materials on here. So they don't match my Vray scene exactly, which is a dig on this because, I mean, that's kind of what I wanted. I wanted to try and recreate that Vray scene exactly. But Twinmotion did add the path tracing in here, which is super cool. You can see it's getting a lot more realistic results than it's gotten in the past, which is awesome. It's giving you nice reflections, nice kind of ray tracing, and that's really cool about Twinmotion. It has a huge library of stuff, obviously, so I was able to kind of drag and drop new things into here pretty easily. And of course, Twinmotion's super easy to use and figure out. It's very user-friendly. Not a steep learning curve. I have a class on it if you want that goes over pretty much every setting in the entire thing. But it is not a hard program to learn, and it has this huge library of stuff. The fact that you can easily just bring in things from Vray translated is awesome. And maybe it's because I was just trying out Twinmotion and it wasn't a full version here. I'm not sure. You guys let me know if you've had success bringing in Cosmos stuff. But anyway, I was pretty satisfied with the path tracing and the more realistic effects that you can get than in previous versions of Twinmotion. And you can see you can do some of the post-processing stuff to try and match that Vray image. I would say Twinmotion didn't get super close. It is a quick and fast and easy solution with a huge library of stuff you can add. And also I should say that it can also be very easily exported as a VR walkthrough, which is a huge plus. So if that's what you need, you know, it's pretty good for that. Trying to match the camera. Another thing is that the camera doesn't come in directly from Vray from what I could tell, and maybe I need to experiment with that more. But in Twinmotion, you basically like grab a screenshot of, like right here, I could say, okay, save this camera shot right here. But when I brought in the Datasmith file, there was no camera saved with it, so there was no snapshots already taken. Maybe there's some way to do that to mimic the exact camera I had in Vray. But the camera isn't like a physical object in here like it would be in UE5, so as far as I could tell, it didn't come in. Oh, one other thing, I had a hard time matching the lighting exactly, the Vray sun system, because in Twinmotion, it's wanting you to control the entire sun using a daylight system, telling it time of day and all that kind of stuff, right? And so it, a lot like the camera, like it didn't have my exact sun in here putting off the light properly. I ended up using the daylight thing and just trying to match it closely. So this wasn't a good way to match my Vray scene exactly, but it is still a good way to, you know, bring a scene in very easily and quickly. You can even direct link it and add a bunch of materials, light it in a generic way, and have some rendering spit out almost immediately. One huge benefit of Twinmotion that I can see is that it can actually link now to UE5. So we all know the pain that it is if your files are created in one software and they don't translate to another software. With Twinmotion, you can start in Twinmotion, add all that stuff in Twinmotion from the library, and then actually take it to UE5 using a Datasmith file again, and UE5 will understand it. So it can be just an intermediate program, and then when you need to take it high end, you can then keep going in UE5. I see that as a huge advantage because it's not a dead end. And when you're talking about workflows, you don't want dead ends. You want things to work nicely together. Just one side note about that workflow. In order to get the Twinmotion stuff to work in UE5, you have to download all the Twinmotion content for UE5, and it's a lot of gigs. These are not small files we're talking about. UE5 stuff, big, takes a long time to download. Okay, so that's a little bit of a joke. It doesn't really take 17 hours, but the file sizes with UE5 are no joke. Okay, the packages you have to download to make the Twinmotion thing work, huge, but also every file you make in UE5, also huge. Okay, so be prepared to use a lot of disk space and have as fast of a hard drive as you can get. And also a dope video card. Obviously, this stuff is pretty hardware intensive. Okay, that's one thing about UE5. It's high end, it's also hardware intensive. Okay, and in the end, I didn't end up using the Twinmotion through Datasmith to UE5 because I didn't want to download all that Twinmotion content to put in to be able to bring in the Twinmotion into UE5. I just didn't want to wait for it, and I forget how many gigs it is, but it's a lot. So because I didn't need any of that Twinmotion stuff, I just came straight from Vray into UE5. And you can see that it gives me a pretty good result. One awesome thing is that my camera is here. It's working. It's a physical object in here that I can look through in UE5, and it matches my Vray camera perfectly. You can see everything else kind of matches too, like even the bloom of the lights and things like that is very close. In this scene, I've got Lumen working, enabled, and so we're getting global illumination going on. The one thing I was having a lot of problems with, well, there's a couple things. The sunlight, again, because I'm using a template, it wants to use the daylight system from UE5 from the template. And that daylight system is awesome, actually, but it didn't match exactly what I had in Vray. So what I did was actually turn down the direct light in the sunlight system from the template all the way to 0, and then I turned on my sunlight. So I used the skylight still from the system that was in here, but used my direct light as the sun. And that way I was able to match exactly the same angle of light that I had in Vray. So that was one issue. And then another issue was that I couldn't get the fog to work right. So there's atmospheric fog in here in UE5. That's great. But you can see it's kind of filling the whole room, and there's not shadow being cast through the fog, so it's not like true volumetric shadows going on. And I couldn't figure out why that was. I saw some things online. Maybe you guys know more about it, but I saw some things that said maybe that ray tracing or ray trace shadows is not compatible with volumetric shadows or the atmospheric fog. So maybe that's what, so I saw some workarounds where you could get around that. I was not able to figure it out. Maybe you guys know, but that's kind of a downfall, right? If you can't have the volumetric fog working with the ray trace shadows, obviously I'd go for the ray trace shadows instead of the volumetrics. But I did have fog going on in here, but like I said, it kind of fills the whole room instead of kind of casting like God rays through that grid on the ceiling. So that's something I need to experiment with more and get it working out. But you can see, if you've seen any of my stuff with Vantage, you can see that this kind of just comes right in and looks a lot like my Vray scene. Obviously, the ray tracing in here is not the same as Vray, whereas Vantage, it pretty much is. It is the same render engine, right? So it matches basically exactly in Vantage. In here, it looks very close, but it gives you more of a full real-time scene that is very navigable, and also you can go in and you could walk through this with a headset if you wanted to. You could make it interactive. You could make it so you can go pick up that chair. You can make menus and buttons and whatever you want. High-end stuff, and it looks pretty dang close to what we were looking at in Vray. So that's a very cool thing. UE5, as always, a great option. But again, this is more of the high-end stuff. There's a learning curve here. This is not something you can just jump into. I do have courses about this, but again, UE5 is for high-end stuff. Not an easy program to learn, but extremely powerful. Okay, let's revisit Vantage now. Vantage is a little bit different solution than either Twinmotion or UE4, UE5, because it isn't exactly real time, as in it's not 30 frames a second and you can navigate around it like a video game. It's gonna take a little more time to refine each frame, but like I've said in other videos, I think it might be the sweet spot for Archviz artists, because it just takes exactly what we have in Vray and translates it immediately into essentially the GPU rendering platform for Vray, and so things are very quick still. It's not something that would have the right frame rate for a video game like UE4 could or UE5, but it is giving us pretty much instant feedback on our rendering setup. So because Archviz people are more worried about visuals, not necessarily about frame rates, then this might be kind of that intermediate step that we need. So this I can see working very well for iterative design and being able to bring in multiple different design options and things like that and change things around very, very quickly and intuitively, because in here you can change materials, you can bring in objects, you can do all sorts of things to change your scene, you can animate it. It can also be direct linked, right? And the result you get looks very, very familiar to you if you've used Vray. I mean, you'll see that they look pretty much the same with some slight quality loss, but it gives you an extremely good idea of what a final rendering would look like. Okay, so a little bit different tool, but I see it being useful. And of course, Vantage, Unreal Engine has Datasmith, which translates all Vray things and then takes it into Unreal Engine. Vantage uses the VR scene to do basically the same thing, and it's very, very fast, very easy. There's there's really no learning curve involved here. It just works, and you are able to navigate around, set up new cameras, and like I said, you can animate objects in here. This is what it looks like to be able to just navigate. So the navigation probably isn't as good as what you would expect in Unreal Engine. But again, that's not really the point of what we're doing here in Vantage. So I see a place for this. I still don't know what the perfect workflow is. We're still working on it. But I can see this being added into my workflow. And I've said in other videos, like in the short term, I can see this being something that's very useful for me as a working professional, where I have lots of different design iterations for each project, and this can give very, very quick feedback on all the different ideas that designers might have, and I can quickly send them an animation or a rendering of it and say, how about this, and get feedback right away. So that's where I see this being extremely useful. Okay, so what does all this mean? There are so many options when it comes to workflows, and it's up in the air as far as is real-time rendering going to kill CPU rendering? Do we need true real-time rendering with UE5, or can we get by with Vantage? Can we use Twinmotion or Lumion or something like that that's more of a complete rendering tool using real-time technology? I mean, what do we do with all this stuff? The fact is, in my mind, there is no perfect solution, and we all have different needs and different goals with our renderings, and so our workflows are probably going to look a little bit different. I'm still trying to work on my perfect workflow for the kind of demands that I have, but like I said, I've got all sorts of different projects, so I kind of just need to learn all these different softwares. That's the fact of the matter, and that's not reasonable for everyone, so I'm going to keep exploring and trying to share some of the pros and cons of these different things with you guys so you can make the decisions for what fits your needs the best. And so I want you to subscribe, because I'm going to dive into each one of these areas more in depth. So we'll look more at Twinmotion, the ins and outs of that. We'll look more at Unreal Engine, and we'll get into maybe some of the path tracing stuff and see if we can really, really get close to what Vray does with Unreal Engine, which would be a very interesting development. We'll look at everything more in depth. I'm going to keep exploring these kind of issues, and of course, just sharing content about Archviz in general, giving you kind of insights into the industry and help you guys on your path. So make sure to subscribe, and also make sure to share your feedback on this. The feedback is driving the video content, so let me know your thoughts about it, and perhaps I can explore some of your questions or some of your thoughts or suggestions in upcoming videos. Thanks a lot.